interaction there, because Stephanie mentioned with the tribalism, I was AF president last year, so I got intimately involved in shared governance, so if it's changing now, forgive me. But one of the things that I would notice is if something was 10+1, it seemed to be exclusively the realm of academic senate. Or, you know, and if it wasn't a 10+1, then it didn't need any consultation at all. And so how do we, what are the best practices for creating a system that really ensures that there is that cross collaboration, that the academic senate is bringing the students, the administration is bringing the students and the staff, keeping them all together so that, you know, it's not automatically 10+1, therefore everyone else go away, this is our thing, or it's operational, go away. And then the second part of that would be, are there any systems in the state where there's a process by which if there is a conflict on this, it can go somewhere before it gets to the chancellor office, of course, like an arbitration or a third-party system. Does that exist?
We've actually been called in, not Beth and me, but as you know, to provide written reports and determinations who was right, who was wrong. Usually, everybody walks away feeling like they lost something when that happens. So, you know, that's an informal process, but a couple of colleges over the years have invited and said, we'll accept whatever decision is made. Now, again, in most cases, including if we go to court, all we do is we go back and start the process over again. In some cases, it would be, no, the decision maker did not have a compelling reason not to accept the mutual agreement with the academic senate, or not to require the mutual agreement of the academic senate. And if there's no compelling reason, then there would be no out. But in a lot of cases, if a compelling legal, fiscal, or organizational reason can be found, and I'll be candid, I think most judges are going to defer to the administrations on campuses because of expertise. Judges don't want to get into a value discussion of what's compelling for legal, fiscal, or organizational reasons. I think it would have to be a pretty extreme case for them to not find a compelling legal, fiscal, organizational reason, or more likely, there just was no documentation provided, you know, in the decision-making process to show that that a compelling reason was considered. In some cases, we've advised, in cases where there just was no trust, and worse than what I sense in the room here, we've advised, okay, every agenda item, in a board packet should have, academic senate, a date or position, classified students. And, I think it's better in a more narrative sense as part of analysis of an agenda item. But, in some cases, that's where you have to go to provide that documentation that, yes, something did go through a process. Now, a best practice campus where we want you to be, a lot of these things are done informally. And because we've planned out ahead, we know what we're going to be working on. A state chancellor a chancellor within the system that we all know very well, the state chancellor, I kind of give it away, a lot of these things at his district were done over breakfast, because that level of trust had been built up. And so you didn't need to have, the exhaustive processes. Now, it requires not only the trust between the leaders of the institution, but also the leaders within each organization. So the academic senate president has to have the trust of his or her membership to make those kind of informal decisions. But again, if you've gone through a lot of these things in advance, you know what the position of the constituency is.
Yeah, I would add that it's always better to try to preempt it than have to fix it later. So if there's a way to look at the scope of what's happening in the state. Gosh, there's a ton of stuff happening. Geez, once upon a time you could put things on a back burner and they just kind of stay there, but now everything's on the front burners boiling over. So you have to have some way to address all that stuff. How are you going to do that? And who should take the lead on it? Are they all academic and professional, or do some of these need to just go to different kinds of groups? Somebody's got to help do that assessment. Somebody's got to bring all those issues to the table and say, who's going to do this? Is that a leadership team? Is that a breakfast conversation? Is that a monthly, weekly meeting where that kind of stuff occurs, where you talk about it and you say, well, gee, if we're going to really look at plus and minus grading, we better give a heads up to the students, that it's coming down the pipe so they have an opportunity to, get that on their calendar. So you guys in the room are all the superheroes of this now, because you just heard all of this, that you have to watch out for each other. You have to know that we got to come up with a plan for delegating and making sure that if it's a 10+1, the faculty are engaged. Because sometimes the faculty don't hear about it, or they're busy doing something else, or we got sidetracked with the latest other thing that came down the way. So who's going to help us out? And same for the students. You guys all heard what the students get to comment on. It was in there, all those 9+1+1 areas. So we need to give them a heads up. We can't just say, oh, hurry, let's go. The AS president's coming. Let's run the other way and not tell them that we're doing this. We got to find a way to have that goodwill to say, let's get the students involved, or let's get classified. They need to know about this. And then that's how you build goodwill. That's not even trust yet. All that is saying it's on the agenda, or it's on our agenda and you need to know about it. And it's not saying, well, you should have read our agenda. It's saying, no, I'm telling you it's on our agenda. I'm being intentional about that. Now, I don't know what you're going to do with that information. You may oppose me, and that's where I get worried about trust. But the first step is to make sure that people who are significantly affected by these issues get to participate. And you all have to do that for each other.
And don't go back and say that I said that Bryce made all of his decisions over breakfast. I mean, he still had a district council. Every item did go on a formal agenda, but the work is done in advance. And so it's not you start off with that very first time it's on the agenda. You kind of know the parameters, and then you have every constituency weigh in.
Thank you very much. Eduardo Cairo, President, Academic Senate. Let me first begin with a clarification here. I've attended several of the bylaws committee, and what they're trying to do is not chastise any faculty, but simply trying to ensure that the faculty that are on reassigned time are working in the best interest of the faculty. The past practice of this campus is to have administration give reassigned time to faculty.
I hope they're working in the best interest of the students.
Right, yeah, I apologize.
I hope those are aligned.
They always are. The perception is that given the fact that the reassigned time was given by administration, there is no accountability for the faculty themselves. So what the current bylaws is trying to do is have all faculty that want to participate in this type of activity simply be given that reassigned time by the Senate. If the Senate gives them that reassigned time, then they are accountable to the Senate. And if the Senate believes that they are not working in the best interest of students and faculty, then the Senate can remove them. At the moment, that process is not in place. So what the Bylaws Committee is trying to do is to ensure that they are working in the best interest of the students and the faculty. And again, no one is being chastised.
The only kid say,
that was a word that I used, so I totally apologize to everyone. So my apologies, Eduardo. I did not intend to say that you guys were doing that. That was what I understood, what I heard, so
right.
my apologies.
But my concerns with that is you're trying to extend 10+1. Because you're going beyond process, some of the process-related issues, some of the more general issues related to student success, where the policy development should be happening in Senate. So the policy development happens there, but if it's a feeling like you have the ability to do the assignment, then you're in control of day-to-day decisions. And I mean, I get politically why you might want to do that, but that's not what the law is designed for.
No, I understand. The bylaws committee understand it. It's just they're trying to ensure that those that are on reassigned time are working in the best interest of those that should be. So let me.
That should be done at the policy level, not at the practice level.
Right. The other issues regarding, I'll go back to what Dan mentioned regarding block scheduling. The committee, we have a shared governance committee on block scheduling. The last time it met was February 2013. about 2 months ago, roughly 2 months ago, during our division meeting, we were informed of this new block schedule. It never went through shared governance at all. It simply did not go through that process. And so it's not that the faculty are opposed to the changes, but the process by which it was implemented. The moment that one of the administrators came to speak to this issue at the Senate, right away several faculty members had concerns about how it's going to affect their departments. Had the process gone through shared governance, these problems should have been implemented. But instead the response is, well, we're going to implement it, and as the problems develop, we'll try to fix it as we go. And it's just the wrong way. So what happened? So my question here is, my question here is, mutual agreement did not occur. So going back to Dan Haley's question is, what do we need to do when there is no mutual agreement? Because we should remain in place, but that doesn't happen. So when it doesn't happen, what should we do?
So my recommendation is that the Senate write a letter to the decision maker, whether it was the CIO or president, and identify which of the 10+1 you believe it fell under, and ask for a response as to why mutual agreement wasn't sought. Because that is one, frankly, where we got into this a little bit earlier about depending on exactly what was happening, it may or may not have fallen under 10+1. And it is your obligation to police it, if you will. When you believe that there was a violation, your first responsibility is to seek an explanation as to why your perceived violation occurred. And that's the paper trail that kind of has to go. You don't start by saying, we're going to shut things down because we believe a decision was made wrongly. Because there are a lot of gray areas. 10+1 seems easy. We could come up with 1,000 gray areas. And that just having that discussion back and forth and not bringing it to the boardroom at public comment where you can't have a back and forth is, what we recommend.
Yeah, I think that's a good step, is to get something in writing that would explain it. But, it would be great if someone who had a cool idea, like let's fix block scheduling, for whatever the motivation. We're losing FTES. It's not a good method the way we're doing it now. We need to have a better consistent schedule for students so that they can take classes in an easier way. We think that this is going to serve our community better because of the bus schedule. I don't know. Whatever the reasons are, somebody should bring those to the folks that are affected by that first and let the input come back to them. Anytime you are leading and you want your decisions to be implemented with the least amount of resistance, then you want the greatest amount of buy-in ahead of time. And those reasons that you want the buy-in can be very compelling. Faculty want to do what's right for students. We want to see that. If students are being negatively affected by things that we've done where we maybe haven't thought about it or could do a better job if we just had, it's my department, I didn't realize that all the other departments were on a different schedule. Gosh, wouldn't that make sense for students if we align some of this stuff? It's an awareness, too. And so, if it doesn't happen that way, then you just have so much undoing and redoing of stuff that causes so much more angst for everyone. So if there's a way to look at those issues ahead of time, hopefully, and say, I wonder if this is going to affect faculty. And I bet 9 times out of 10, it's going to. Even if you can't find it on the 10+1, it's going to affect faculty somehow. And my next guess, it's going to affect students about that many times too. Just call. We have these cell phones. We think we're connected all the dang time, but we don't use them maybe enough sometimes in that reaching out to let folks know that there's an issue here. There's something coming down. I just got it across my desk. Hey, did you see that email? that just came from the Chancellor's office or the State Academic Senate about AB 86 or the next thing that's coming. And sharing that information ahead of time. Can it be informal? Yes. Can it be formal? Yes. The goal is to make it happen somehow so that by the time you get to a good decision, the board can feel confident in it, and so can everybody else on campus. Because there's so many decisions that have to be made, and I can understand an urgency by some folks to want to just, well, this is really my territory. You know, I'm like in charge of this area. I'm just going to go ahead and get this done because it's in my job description. It's probably in my evaluation, and I want to get it done. But, you know, we are collaborative, collegial organizations. It's academia. Gosh, you know, that's what we're about, is talking stuff through, talking it to death sometimes, but talking it through. And so we've got to find a way to do that. Now, the unfortunate piece is what happens when it doesn't. Because when it doesn't happen the way people are expecting it or hoping it works, you just crumble that whole foundation underneath there. And to put those bricks back in when it's already started to crumble from the top is very difficult to do, as you guys know. But there has to be a starting place. There has to be a commitment that if this topic comes across my desk and I'm a leader at this campus, and there's a lot of leaders in a lot of different places, from curriculum chairs to student government leaders to classified senate to union reps and senate reps and administrators in all capacities, that if I see something come across my desk that I think might affect those other groups, I got to give them a shout out. I just gotta. And then you open the opportunity to build trust again. You open the opportunity for dialogue. And we may not be able to do a lot about some of the issues that have transpired in the past, because they're in the past and things got muffed up one way or another, perhaps, from your perspective. But we have an opportunity to go forward. You have an opportunity starting, you know, today, tomorrow, with whatever the next thing is, to try to find a way to make it better. So you know what doesn't work. Got some examples of that, for sure. But what are some examples of things that can work? What can we do? What are we willing to commit to? What are we willing to do as a baby step? Just one, because it's overwhelming when the bricks are crumbling and things are starting to get shaky at the top. You can't put all of them back under there right away, but you can start at one corner of the foundation and figure out what we're willing to do.
I put the slide back up a while back, but I think right now is the perfect time to point out another phrase I didn't mention earlier, and that's turf battles. My sense is pretty much everybody in this room is ready to say, no, that's mine right now. Everybody, is my sense. And it's got to be about ours, our students, our community. And we got to put away that stuff from the past. You know, goodwill will come about once we start having an active dialogue together, not apart. And that's why I don't like to, you know, I like the processes where you have a college council and, like, you know, there are big issues and little issues, but there are no surprises. I had breakfast with Bryce last Wednesday, Bryce Chancellor Harris, simply so there'd be no surprises. I've got a board meeting coming up. We've got consultation council on Thursday. There's some real tough issues. We're trying to wrestle with the faculty obligation number and all this stuff. We just sat down to have breakfast. Everybody's got time to do a 7:30 breakfast once a week. Sit down, go through the issues so there'd be no surprises. You know, because we have a state-local tension. My job is look out for your interests. His job is look out for the state's interests. Hopefully they're aligned. Not always. And that's when I mentioned him having breakfast meetings when he was Chancellor Los Rios.
He meets with me too.
And he meets with Beth too. It's exactly for that reason. Now, sometimes it's just a pickup of a phone call of, I just want to let you know, I know your members may have a problem with this. I want to see how far we can go. Before we ever get to the policy formation process, before we're sitting around the consultation council table where people are amped up, we've already kind of Well, I've had a chance to talk to some of my leadership, Beth's had a chance to talk to some of her leadership, and we kind of have a good idea. This takes work, and it's about relationships and far more than policy. It takes people. If this is all done by computer, it would be a lot easier, but it takes people and it takes relationships.
Thank you very much. Your responses at least has validated the actions of the Senate. We have created resolutions. We presented to the College Council, and at the next College Council meeting, they've been placed under action items, so hopefully we can take action items, the action item, vote on it, and then pass it to the Board of Trustees. And what you stated right now regarding goodwill, absolutely, we definitely need that. We need to build relationships. Unfortunately, there's a lack of. I mean, the mere fact that the Academic Senate was not allowed to invite members of shared governance committees for our own lunch, that's how petty it's gone. But hopefully this is the first step that we can move forward and begin to create the goodwill. Thank you.
I've heard lots of elements from different constituencies of screwing up. And you could probably all think of points of screw-ups in the last 5 years by a variety of constituencies. You can, every single day, you have the opportunity to get up and say, you know what, I screwed that up and I'm going to do it differently next time. I do it with my own staff in our office. I do it with policy, with consultation council, and you can do it too. And that's how you get past the turf battles. If you're not willing to admit that we all have ownership and that tensions ran high, then you're not going to move forward. You're not going to be able to build goodwill. You're going to stay in a dysfunctional state, and it's going to hurt the students. I don't think that the accrediting commission is going to come in and yank your accreditation because of this. But if you have to start going through a process of sanctions from the accrediting commission, just going to the first level sanction, which this is a subject matter they're willing to go to, has cost some colleges enrollment. And while we say we're all about students, what happens when enrollment goes down? Jobs go down. So we all have a vested interest. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. What a great time to come here right before tax day, right? You've got lots of good times. So my name is AC Pinella, and I'm faculty in our speech department, and I was on the executive board for Academic Senate last year. And I really appreciate some of the things that you're talking about, and I know this is a fun meeting because you're coming in with people who are really relaxed and so excited. But when we're talking about goodwill, I think one of the things we've really struggled with is trust, which you've started to bridge to. And the thing that I've been really interested in is how we look at the 10+1 in terms of managing change and what that looks like. And so, for example, I want to go in two ways. One is, let's say something comes up under the 10+1, and we start to have a dialogue about it. How do we have a dialogue that really looks collegial? And if that dialogue comes out maybe not in the position that you wanted, so a decision is made even through the shared governance process that you didn't feel really awesome about, how do we make sure that we are talking about it in a way that doesn't individualize people, point people out, like is really about the ideas? But the second thing is, how might we use the 10+1 to be proactive in terms of college planning and process as opposed to reactive? Because my experience is, the reason it gets so personal is that we're constantly reacting to things as opposed to being proactive around them. And so I'll use a basic model that we've had on campus as an example. About 3 years ago, it's funny that you guys mentioned the idea of moving from a chair model to a dean model. Scott mentioned that earlier. We're in kind of a reverse process where we're going from a dean model to something else. It's been about a 3.5-year process. There are a number of people in this room who chaired committees to try to make this a collegial dialogue and move forward. And it went to our academic senate to move through this model, and it got shot down, and now we're in a place of ambiguity, right? We're not sure what's going to happen. Faculty feel very unsafe, and now it feels like we're reacting. And even though the process started about 3.5 years ago, I still hear in meetings like this was just sprung on us, right? Like this just came out. So the reason that I'm asking that is there a way that we might, and particularly our Senate leaders, might use the 10+1 as a way to negotiate that change a little bit smoother, but also be proactive in terms of what future impacts that might have?
Yeah, my experience is that faculty always feel like stuff just got sprung on them.
We all do.
Yeah, like, where did this come from? I I didn't know we were doing this or changing this. Where did this come from? And, oh, it's been on the agenda for a year. Where have you been? You know, so I feel the challenge of that, trying to make sure that you get the word out. And I feel the pain for Senate leaders who, you know, feel like, gosh, I put this on the agenda every time. And, you know, every time we read it, people are going, well, you know, they're still stuck at the first part, right? Nobody can get past the first part of it. So the idea of being proactive is important. So recognizing that some of the things that are happening at the campus are about 10+1. And so the Senate, and use your faculty leaders in other areas to help feed you that information, like curriculum, what are they hearing from the curriculum side? Professional development leader, what are you hearing? You know, because that might change this year. There's legislation and stuff's going on. You know, your leaders in program review, what are they hearing? Your accreditation folks. Get those folks to give you some of those topics so that you can get them on the agenda. Now, once they're there,
Right.
how do you start to build decision making? Or once you make a decision, how do you get the faculty to support it? Because sometimes once a decision's made, people still like to not back it, right? They want to keep their side. Like, well, the Senate made that decision, but I'm not doing that. And so that doesn't help either, because that erodes the fabric of the Senate, because the Senate has to be able to make decisions. That's the recommending body. They're the ones that are going to take the recommendations forward. So an individual faculty member may not like the decision that was made with the Senate, or they may really like it. Either way, the Senate takes that forward, something else can still happen, right, regarding that decision. The board may not accept the recommendation, or it might take longer to get to the agreement than they were hoping for on either side, or whatever. But you've got to have a process that people recognize and that they can feel confident in. Even if they don't like the outcomes, they believe in the process for getting there. And that's really crucial. So if you're going to have things on your agenda that's a first read, and then there's a second read where you take action, then folks have to know, this is a first read, this is my time to provide comment. Ooh, I better go back and talk to my department or my division, get the feedback, because the Senate's going to take action on this. We have to move forward. So that there's an understanding then that the decision's been made and it's going to go forward and it's not coming back again, or perhaps there's a motion to delay one more month because this was midterms and nobody had an opportunity because everybody's busy grading, so we're, okay, granted, let's give it one more month, it's going to come back, but then we're going to take action and we need to support our Senate leaders in this direction and go forward. And, you know, that's the democratic process. You know, lots of decisions are made by votes that none of us are fully supportive of, but we have to live with those decisions until the next opportunity comes for us to elect or vote on a change. So there has to be a process there, and I think that would help somewhat, or at least a belief in the process.
Okay, so then what I heard you say, and I want to paraphrase just to make sure that I really am hearing it clearly, is that when we have someone, so when you're talking about things like the Curriculum Instruction Committee, as you know, to be a chair of that committee is not a light task. They usually have to go through a number of years of training to be prepared for it. So that person kind of becomes like a content expert in that area. So we should be trusting a little bit in that content expert area to come report and feed into us, right? Is that what I've heard a little bit?
Yeah, I think that would be useful because they do have that content expertise. That's part of participatory governance, is getting the folks with the expertise at the table.
Right. The reason that I'm asking is because oftentimes what happens is we have those people who come in, and then when it goes to the full Senate board, what will happen is that it will override the people who have had that kind of content expertise. And what's a way that we might be able to facilitate that smoother process? Because I think that's one of the other areas of trust that we've seen breached a little bit.
Yeah, and that happens lots of times, lots of places. So I don't want you to think that's only unique here, because we do hear that from other folks. How do you get that trust in the people who are doing the work? Like the SLO coordinator comes in and says, here's what we have to do with SLOs, and everybody goes, nah, we don't want to do that. And here they put all that work into it, and they're charged with that responsibility, and they've studied the accreditation documents or what the responsibilities are. So how can you help educate your senators on that is really the question. The people in the Senate who are going to vote, how do you do that? Well, does the information need to be more timely? Do the reports need to be more often? Does there need to be a special opportunity for people to meet with that individual to hear about it? Is it a written report? Is it an oral report? If you're just expecting people to go to their website and read the minutes on their own, probably not going to happen, even though there's so much goodwill there to say, hey, we made it all available to everybody because it's on our website. But typically people don't go there. They have to be led, read, and kind of fed all that information. So that's a good conversation for the Senate to have, to say, geez, we've got these people working for us. How do we count on their expertise? How do we have them bring us a report that gives us the information we want so we can then make a good decision? And I would think the board is kind of thinking with those same ears. We have all these experts in the field. The Senate is one of our experts. We want to be able to get information from them in such a way that helps us be able to make good decisions. How does that happen? How do we get that? If the information is filtered, maybe that's not a good way for that to occur. How can it come directly so that there can be this sense that we feel empowered now because we've had good conversations and we've gotten good information? So I think that those are some questions that the Senate can wrestle with, and then they can also make those proposals to the board as that group that they want to ultimately inform about what's happening, what's going on there. What's on your agenda? What's coming up? What can we watch for in the near future in terms of possible policies or concerns? We're giving you a heads up. We would like to see this issue move more slowly because faculty haven't weighed in yet. So how do we communicate those kinds of things in a way that's healthy for communication? The reason we're doing this is to build goodwill. It's not to point fingers. It's not to, try to create greater angst. The purpose is for communication, and that's something that has to be on everybody's radar, I guess. I don't know, did you want to add anything on that?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'd like to actually just address what you just said, although Eduardo covered part of it, and that is the Academic Senate understands very well that its primary responsibility is to make recommendations concerning curriculum and academic and professional matters to the Board of Trustees. But we often, and we do feel entirely frustrated that we don't really have a venue of making those recommendations. So in the interest of moving forward, I think it would be very productive for us to really review some best practices. You've mentioned a few, but they're more informal ones, about how the Academic Senate, which is the voice of the faculty, can have access to communicating with the Board of Trustees. And so perhaps you could address that, because I think that is a real problem on this campus.
Eduardo, do you give a regular report to the board at board meetings? Yes, I do. Okay, because I was going to mention that as a good avenue. And the law does give the Senate the opportunity to directly address the board on any given topic, typically under the 10+1. So maybe that report needs to be reshaped, expanded? I don't know.
Well, I think the problem that we're having is that say, for example, I've received a letter from the General Counsel saying that the Board of Trustees is aware of our feelings, our beliefs during public comment. And so to be able to simply express the activities of the Senate during public comment or during my report is, from the Senate's point of view, not enough. What we'd like to have is a rapport with the Senate, so that we can, with the Board of Trustees, so we can ask them questions, so we can get information from them, simply it being a one-way conversation. And unfortunately, right now, the response is that there is a designee, President Rocha, and unfortunately, for various reasons, there's just a lack of confidence right now. So our preference is to speak directly to the Board of Trustees, to have a conversation, not simply say these are the events that are activities that are happening.
Is it agendized? Is it on the agenda? Or is it not on the agenda, your report?
Well, I've tried to make several requests to be placed on the agenda, but I think out of the past 5 requests, they've all been denied with the statement that they're not operational in nature, so as such, the answer is no.
Yeah, well, I would encourage the board to actually agendize that and allow the Senate to have that conversation with you. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. It doesn't even have to be a conversation. It could just be a report that's identified on the agenda where the board may be able to ask a couple of questions of the Senate President, because what that does is it builds rapport. It's not the time to negotiate mutual agreement, so I don't want that to occur. You don't want that happening in a board meeting. You want that to happen behind closed doors and, you know, work it through and get everything, all the ducks in a row. But when the Senate President has the opportunity to address the board and takes advantage of that opportunity to share directly with the board about what's going on, what the resolutions were at plenary over the weekend, what's happening locally, what that does is help the board see what the Senate is doing and the value of the Senate and why the Senate might be engaged. So when a recommendation comes to you at some point, your reasons for accepting that recommendation come in a greater context. There's a state Senate initiative to do this. It's not just Pasadena City College. Or this is what we're hearing from accreditation about this topic. Wanted to let you know we're on top of that as a Senate. We've been creating transfer degrees and wanted to let you know how this is happening with our Senate and our faculty are engaged. And we've got this many in the pipeline to let you know as board members that this is an important part of the work of the Senate, because board members, you have delegated that work to the Senate. They are working on your behalf. So to get that report back from them is a way to close that loop and to build kind of that communication there. So that would be one thing that I would encourage.
I would agree that it is a common practice to allow for an informational report on the agenda. But I do agree with Beth that the board can choose how it wants to seek the input of those affected by its decisions. It's the best practice is to have one communicator presenting it to the board that can reference the positions of the other constituencies. Otherwise, it just gets unwieldy. And I say one communicator. At times it may be the Vice President of Instruction, maybe the Superintendent President, maybe the Academic Senate President that's actually doing the presentation and can then communicate what the positions of the others are, so that you don't have, every agenda item having, 6 speakers on it. So for informational reports, and I thought you said you do give.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
There's a standing informational report.
Shared governance committees make the reports at the end of the meeting,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. And that's common practice. But having an interaction with multiple people on each agenda item is not. You do that through public comment and with written materials provided to the board in advance, generally speaking.
I must say that there has been a thawing of relations between the Board of Trustees and the Academic Senate. President Trustee Fellows we've now started having breakfasts, informal breakfasts, to begin to have discussions. So that is a positive step.
But you're coming back from, when everybody does votes of no confidence, that is going to freeze up relations. And it's going to take a long time for those to thaw. And I get the passion behind that issue. People outside of this room will decide whether it was done rightly or wrongly procedurally. But when we take things to that level, it's very hard to come back down. And we went through a period of time about 10 years ago where it was kind of a votes of no confidence were going kind of all over the state. And a lot of colleges, it took a long time to get past that.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm here because I would like to respond. I'm the first trustee, I think, that's spoken, and I'm glad Mr. Cairo didn't mention the all the shared governance groups are on the agenda. They make reports. There is an opportunity for the board to respond to the reports, to ask questions if they want to. In the past, we've had Senate presidents who've given us Senate notes. I think they called them nano notes or something, where they gave all kinds of information. So I think that avenue is there. But what I would like to ask, I have a couple of points, but I'd like to ask Scott if he would respond to this, because I think Beth alluded to it, but I would like it specifically stated. How can the board respond to any kind of a comment that's made on items not on the agenda? When someone from the public comes and it doesn't matter who it is, and makes comments about something that's not on the agenda, what can the board do with that? I mean, it's on every agenda we have, but we keep hearing the board's not responsive. So could you respond to what we can legally do if someone brings up a topic that's not on the agenda?
A board should not take any steps that could be deemed deliberative on an issue that is not on the agenda. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to sit there and, with duct tape over your mouth. You can say, thank you for your feedback, or we'll agendize that in the future, but you should not it is a violation of the Brown Act to take any step that could be perceived to be as deliberative, meaning contributing to a future decision. And, that's an issue over email, right now, where, with the council, boards can't send, a chain of emails where it gets passed along to 3 different board members about something that might be on a future agenda. And the same thing's true just in public comment.
Right. I have 2 other really quick points, okay? The second one is, I would like for you to comment, I know the answer to this, but I would like a comment on what happens when boards of trustees do not follow their own procedures. So, for example, I'm going to give something which I think is relatively non-controversial, redistricting. We have a policy, and by the way, I'm the chair of the Policy Review Committee. We have a policy on redistricting, and I think we followed it, to the minute. We actually hired the consultant recommended by the league, and I don't think we've had any challenge to that. But what could the consequences be, and not just in this particular instance where there's legal, but what could the consequences be if the board did not follow their own procedures, particularly by the Accreditation Commission? Would you comment on that?
There's 2 issues. Number one, a decision could be required to be reversed. So if you make a decision not using either substantive or procedural policy, that decision could be ordered to be reversed by a judge. Right. Or could be determined in a grand jury report. Sometimes that's where you see grand juries investigate agencies. The Accrediting Commission certainly that would fall below an Accrediting Commission standard, and it could be, lead toward an adverse status or at least a recommendation.
Okay, and then my third one isn't a question, but it's a comment, if that's okay. One of the things that we are in the process of doing is developing a policy on civility. And the board meetings, I think, have been very lacking in civility. And from what I've heard, there's a lack of civility on campus. So I think the board members have tried to be civil in their response, and I would like to, I don't think we really should have to have a policy on civility with this as a college campus. I think we should be able to discuss things in a reasoned and rational and civil manner. But I would like to urge everyone, until we get a policy, to pretend like it's there. And in our interactions with each other, you said let's reset. Let's reset on that. Let's be civil with each other. You can say very damning things about people, but you can say it in a civil and polite manner.
Principles of community are very important. I mean, universities spend a lot of time developing them about how do we deal with each other. You may be familiar with the debate at Brandeis about whether to give an honorary degree to a scholar that's been critical of Islam, and a campus being torn apart by that. It takes a long time to heal these things. And the only people being hurt, you're not administrators or faculty or staff, you're not really being hurt on this process breaking down. The students sure are, though. When the board meetings aren't working right and we're not having a collaborative discussion and working together for goodwill, the student and community perceives it. I read about what happens at PCC up in Sacramento. I got Google News. That's hurting this college. Your chance of building more buildings are being hurt by the perception of that lack of civility. And I'm not laying blame on any particular constituency, but don't think that this is just about disagreement among some current leaders on campus. This will have long-standing impacts if it continues. Over here, and then, is it, oh, on civility? Okay, quickly.
Yeah, and somebody else brought it up earlier. I recognize that there are forum for faculty to address the board in their regularly scheduled meetings. But I also feel as a faculty member here that one of the reasons that some of this breakdown might be happening is that there is an enormous gap between your average garden variety faculty member and board members. Because they don't know each other, they're not seeing them on campus, they're not seeing them in our programs, as visits. There's not much interaction. And I think part of that is because the lack of civility is built up, but I think it's feedback. And I think they don't know each other as people. There's a lot of paranoia on both sides, as you've heard being expressed. And to the extent that individual board members are able to make their way on the campuses, or individual faculty are able to engage board members and look what we're doing, I think that would go a long way to improving some of the situation.
Well, I'll be candid. I've been at a lot of very well-functioning colleges, and the last thing they want is board members on their campus. I mean, I think that that feeling is an outcome of all the other tensions, and that once we get past that, it's like, the things are fine. It's like, some boards pride themselves on the length of their board meetings. We had one board going until like 2 o'clock in the morning. Meanwhile, some of the best functioning districts in the state are in and out in an hour, and that includes dinner. I mean, so some of that will resolve itself over time, but it is important for the board to work together as a unit and to observe the leadership structure on campus.
Yeah, and I'll share a thought for all of you in terms of how to engage the board in a way that avoids the micromanagement aspects and all of that. What I've seen some colleges do with their boards, their districts, is somehow around the board meeting, either before or after, have tours of parts of the campus to see the latest and greatest of what's going on in a particular area, have presentations. They've even focused it on student success. So rather than do that scorecard like once a year, they take aspects of that and have a little presentation before the board meeting where the faculty in those areas can come in and talk about it. So there are other ways for this bridge to be built so that the garden variety faculty member and classified person and, others who don't typically engage with the board can show off their work and what they're doing to the board members if you incorporate that as part of the regular board meetings. And you guys certainly have a lot to show off here. So that would be one way that other districts have approached that.
Well, she kind of made the comment that I wanted to make. I think that a lot of the faculty members are doing a really good job here, and they're not so controversial. And the board, I think, only sees the more controversial situations. And I feel like the board and the administration does not respect the opinion of the garden variety faculty member. And I don't think there's a good feeling there, even when some of the things that you said were like, oh, faculty would be willing to have a schedule in the best interest of the student. I actually saw smirks going on back and forth between some of the board members and administrators. So I think there's this feeling like all faculty are evil or something, and I don't know how we're going to get past that. There is no trust, and there is no goodwill. And to hear the board member here speak, that was really nice for me. I never get to hear the board members interact at all. I think that we need a little more give and take like that. I know the president is always willing to have us come sit in his office, and I appreciate that, and I've done that. But I don't really feel like he listened to what I say or took the advice for anything. It was just sort of like, check, now you feel better, we'll go on. So I don't think that the faculty opinion is valued here at all. And I think we're kind of viewed as being difficult, troublemakers, and I don't think that's true for most of us. So I just wanted to say that. And I also wanted to ask you, Do you ever see a school where it's gotten so bad there is no fix? Because I know a lot of faculty members are now getting to the point where they're saying, I don't think it can be fixed, I give up. I'm just going to focus on my class.
If City College of San Francisco can be fixed, then any college can be fixed. I mean, we've hit bottom in some places. I was up at Redwoods. It was with Michelle, I think, wasn't it? Like 3 years ago or something. College of Redwoods. So you know where Redwoods is? It's like you go to Washington State and make a left turn. No, it's way up there. You know, a 6-hour drive, and it was, 6-hour drive, and they schedule on a Monday. So it's like, I go up on Sunday. I mean, I was okay flying down last night. That's okay. But take up a whole Sunday, whole day or day and a half with them, and then drive home and get home at 11 o'clock at night or something. And we were standing there, and the faculty said, the academic senate, not the academic senate leader, let's not generalize everybody, said, well, we think it's actually in the best interest that we lose accreditation, because then we'll get rid of all our administrators. And I said, you've got to be, you lose your jobs, right? And, here in Eureka, it's not like jobs growing on trees. And then I went after them personally. I talked about, losing a day at home. I could be gardening. I could be doing all of this. And we're willing to put work into this institution. And that's what's got to happen here, too. Some work has got to be put in to repair the damage that's been done. Now, let me tell you that Redwoods is actually in pretty good shape right now. And they had the most contentious faculty that I've seen at any college. They said, well, they just stopped attending committee meetings. They said, well, we decided we'll just grind governance to a halt by not going to committee meetings. We're having a boycott. Lessons learned there, it was about people and not process. We didn't have to redesign. San Francisco, we had to redesign their whole committee structure and all of that. The college president, they had an interim when I was up there. The college president and the leaders buried some hatchets, and they're making some real tough decisions right now. They're closing a center in Fort Bragg. I mean, it's not like everything's beautiful and wonderful and therefore everybody's getting along. They're doing the tough work, but it really is about personality. It's about working and being committed to work together, because you don't really have a choice. You can wait till somebody else is going to be a leader of this constituency or that constituency, but the history will remain unless you choose to make the change now. A lot of stuff I've heard in the room, I heard many years ago under a previous president. Some of the stuff is just carried forward. No offense to Dr. Rocha, but it doesn't matter who the president is if you just keep the same attitudes about the administration, right? If we just think that it's a system, that's how it is. It's always adversarial. I can tell you, and Beth will tell you, that we go to colleges where it's not, where people are committed to working together. We go to, at Kern, they have us at either the Kern District or Bakersfield College every year. And they boom it out. It's the biggest district in the state, 25,000 square miles. So they boom it out to all their sites, including Mammoth, just to have an annual discussion about how can we improve what's already a great process, and to have that discussion and relationships and show that everybody's on the same page. So it can happen. It's going to take some real hard work, and a lot of people kind of need to put their heads down a little bit and say, okay, we done wrong. What can we do right?
Yeah, those are all great ideas, Scott, and I completely agree. And having been I am from a district that had many no confidence votes, grand jury investigation, union that asked us to work to contract, very difficult times. For years, it was awful. And being the Senate president that had to deliver the first no confidence vote, because there were many, it became very clear that what a no confidence vote tells you is that there is no communication and people have stopped being willing to talk to each other. And any place that is so dependent on human beings for the success cannot let communication die. It would be like being in a relationship, a marriage, and saying you don't want to communicate anymore. And what is your only option then? It's divorce. You're not in a place where divorce is an option. So no matter how bad that communication is that led to no confidence votes or worse kinds of actions that we've seen all over the state, and colleges do survive all of that stuff, but it really, really takes an effort to want to talk again. And that means that there has to be an avenue for those conversations to take place. And they don't have to be giant to start with. They can be very small. Finding some common ground. Like, okay, we've got just 10,000 things that are wrong, but there might be one that's right. What is it? Find it and start there with building some common ground. If your scorecard looks great in some area where you can just be so thrilled about that, then start there and let's talk about how do we even improve it more. Don't get, stressed about trying to improve some of the things that might take more work or might be more contentious. But finding that place where there's some common ground that can be a starting point. And that could be within constituencies first, and then across constituencies, because it might be that some constituencies need to reach out to each other and find ways to build a bridge that hasn't existed or could exist or could be stronger in different ways. So I feel your pain. I have been there. I so understand how awful that is, and having to stand in the shoes of the Senate president and a garden variety faculty member and a union member, I know how hard it is. So it really, really takes an effort. And we're willing to help you find those places where there might be a crack where you can start. But there has to be commitment to doing it from all sides, too.
And maybe the next resolution of the Academic Senate needs to be something along the lines of, the new day. Next communication from the college president may need to be along those lines to start doing olive branches. And I really agree with what Beth said in terms of the first conversation may need, and that's what I said, resolution within the Senate about empowering the leadership of the Senate to start this new day. Because I know it's tough to be in a political position and have the troops behind you saying, go, 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 and then what is my latitude? You need to give the latitude to this president to change relationships and the other leaders to change relationships, to make an active effort. Because right now, my sense is everybody rushes back, sits at their computers, and starts firing off missives again. A friend of mine became a college president at a great college, but had a really bad dean, I think it was. Everybody said, this guy's awful. And the Academic Senate was ready to do a resolution no confidence vote. And so my friend gets the job, knows this guy's a problem, and he calls in the Academic Senate leadership, sits them down and says, doing this will just hurt this otherwise great institution. Give me a year to solve this problem. And this is a tough one in terms of, possible lawsuits and everything if you just move the person out. So he said, give me a year. And if I haven't done something that you're satisfied with, do the no confidence vote against me. And he bought a year and he fixed the problem. And that's the kind of hard work it takes. And they're willing to put yourself on the line in order to avoid going down the wrong path. I wish we could have been here, a few years ago and avoided some of the tensions that rose that has colored every single comment and question we've heard today. This isn't about stuff that's going on today. This is about stuff in the past. And as I mentioned, some stuff in the past from previous college presidents.
Oh, super. I'll be semi-brief. I'm Dave Hewitt. I teach over here. Yeah, I don't think I see it as a turf battle. I don't see it as a bunch of fussy faculty and we did our self-esteem stroked. Like, no fair, we were going to do that. At least from what I can see, the faculty through the Senate is really willing and eager to work with the Board of Trustees and cooperate and communicate. And I don't see it as an emotion. It's like, we're all upset because these things happen. We are upset, but those things did happen, and we are stuck with the baggage and the wreckage of all that.
You know what, you said something that just showed the exact problem. The job of the Academic Senate in a single college district or a multi-college district is not to work with the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has a legal responsibility to step back and to allow the policy development to happen and then consider it when it comes to that point.
I could
so I
say
understand the personal,
consult
and we want to
collegially with the Board of
relationship.
Trustees. Consult collegially?
No,
I saw that word.
And Beth, I'm willing to, we do sometimes disagree. When we're using language about reaching mutual agreement, that, yes, the Board of Trustees may be making the final decision, but the path to that mutual agreement should be through, or should be on campus in between board meetings, and that's with the college president, other administrative leaders, other constituency groups. That's just a fundamental disagreement I have with the role of the Senate, understanding that at the end of the day, there is that decision maker.
Yeah, and I appreciate that sense that it's the board and the Senate that have to reach mutual agreement. However, it's rarely the board that you're actually reaching the mutual agreement with the first time out the gate. What you're doing is you're working with the board's designee, whoever the board has placed in charge of that particular issue or whatever the structure is. That's where the Senate's going to work first to get the mutual agreement, and then that goes up to the board as a recommendation where the mutual agreement on their side, they have put a designee there to represent them in negotiations or in that mutual agreement process with the Senate. So that you don't want to wait to reach mutual agreement at a board meeting. That's not where the negotiation would be taking place. So I hope that that was not an issue we should have addressed earlier in trying to help understand how the process would work. But that's typically how anybody with mutual agreement in the state, those conversations and all that hard work and editing documents and trying to find out what everybody is good with happens before you get to that.
And the perfect analogy in our roles, we're on consultation council. We have a discussion with the state body, consultation council. We have a discussion with the chancellor and vice chancellors, and then the chancellor is the one who presents it to the board of governors. Now we have an opportunity for public comment to say we vehemently disagree, although all the work has been done, that very rarely happens. The parties around the consultation council table, our relationship, our policy development relationship is with the chancellor. And if we're constantly going to the board of governors, and the analogy is perfect to here, what we're saying is we have zero confidence in our college president. So in that comment, in this discussion, I think you're right back to where you were a few years ago. You've got to have confidence. And if you say you don't have confidence in the college president, you're saying you don't have confidence in anybody else in administrative roles. And I know, and I've talked to many of you, I know that's not the case. But we have to think about this. This is something that you don't just read a presentation and then, okay, it's over. We have to really think about our roles in this process and how we interact with each other. So I'm sorry I interrupted you, but it was a good conversation. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for going 3.5 hours without a break. And so we wonderful to express my thanks and to all my colleagues
you and to all the other leaders in particular, because hopefully you found some of my words difficult to hear across the board. And that's an important part of this. Beth and I did some marriage therapy earlier, and that one's come up a few times. And it can be difficult to hear, to listen, and so I certainly appreciate